She didn't get me a gift. And you know what's even worse? No one noticed. Not only did she not get me a gift, but no one noticed that she didn't give me a gift. Hey, I'm so glad you guys have joined me today. We're going to talk about toxic families, difficult family dynamics. I know a lot of us have been chatting with me over the past few weeks and months about your family, about what it's like to try to live in a kind of family like that. A lot of us who've been in a romantic relationship, unfortunately, probably is dealing with toxicity in our extended family or maybe in our own family, or just because that's how many people are narcissistic, is that you can't avoid that group. You're going to end up encountering them in some level or not. I would love to hear how many of you are coping with that kind of situation right now in your life. Who? Is it a sibling? Is it a parent? Maybe it's an in-law? Maybe it's an aunt or uncle? I would love to know, who are you guys struggling with? That would be really, really interesting. Toxic families. Did you know that you can have a trauma bond with your family? How many of you do you think have struggled with a trauma bond? I have. I've struggled with a trauma bond with my mother. I didn't have one so much with my father, but I had a really intense one with my mother for most of my life. It was really, really painful. There's so many things that happen in family dynamics. So let me kind of back up and have a way to think about families. Families, you have to think of families like an organism. They operate like a body, so you have in a body, you've got the hands and what the arms are doing or what the feet's doing, what the face is doing. And then they're all separate parts, but they work together in conjunction to each other. That's how family theory, family therapy thinks of families. They think of it as a system, like an organism. It itself is its own system, and it has its own rules within that system. It's very interesting. So that's kind of good news and bad news for us. It was good news because, well, I'll tell you the bad news first. The bad news part is because the families operate as a system, then that means that you are sort of consigned, almost like constricted. What's the word when the army doesn't volunteer you, but you're constricted? There's a word where you just you get called up and you have to serve. That's like that. You don't have a choice. You're born into the situation, or you marry into the situation, and then you're constricted into this, or fixed into this dynamic. You're drafted. Thank you. You're drafted into it, and you don't have a lot of choice about it. And they assign roles to you. You often don't even get to assign your own role. You may find out that you're seen as the one who walks on water, sort of the golden person. If you're an adult, like you marry into it, you're not obviously a child, but you can be sort of the golden in-law or the golden adult, or you suddenly are the scapegoat and you can't do anything right. Or maybe you're the lost child, the lost one, and everybody you're invisible and you don't even get invited to things. They forget to send you the invitation. I remember one time my mother-in-law, this was awful. My mother-in-law, she always bought one gift for every family member and in-law in the family. And then there was the big to-do. It was like the one thing that happened at the Christmas is that she would pass these gifts out and then watch everybody open that gift that she passed out. She didn't get me a gift. And you know what's even worse? No one noticed. Not only did she not get me a gift, but no one noticed that she didn't give me a gift. It wasn't until I was in my ride home with my family and I looked over to my late husband and said, "Your mom didn't get me anything this year." "What?" Yeah, no, she forgot me this year." "Oh, man." But you know what? He didn't say anything. That didn't bode well either, although... that's painful, isn't it? So it's interesting. So that's the bad news. You're drafted into this situation. You're assigned a role, whether or not you want the role or not. And then it kind of all just sort of plays out. But here's the good news. Because it's an organism, and I want to, again, think of a body. So if you're a body and suddenly you stub your toe, or maybe even you break a toe, that toe is affecting the whole body. Everything that's occurring within that body is now affected by that one area. It impacts the whole organism. So the same thing happens with family dynamics. So if you change, you're changing the family. They're forced to change because you're changing. So that's sort of the good news, is that you can, if you want to be sort of malicious about it, throw a wrench in the whole thing and make things very difficult by being different, by behaving different. But the hard part is because of the dynamics, the pressure is so intense that it's very, very hard to do that. And often that's what family therapy would work on, is like how to help you sort of do something in a different way to have an impact on the family. But you'll get a lot of pressure, a lot of pushback, because think of this again. Let's think of our bodies again. That's a really great kind of way to conceptualize this. The body has a way of being. It's called homeostasis. It's sort of a normal state. It likes normal. It may not be a healthy normal, but it likes what it's used to. So when you change, it's changing the way that the body it kind of works, and it doesn't like it. So it's going to put pressure so that you guys go back to being the way you were before. So it's very, very difficult. So it's going to be super, super intense. I just wrote, my homeostasis is being, so her normal is being ignored and her needs don't get met. And now she looks for that in a relationship. See, here's the hard part about that is that because it's been a role that you've had, you now have learned that role. You may hate it, but you've learned to go with it. So when you get into a relationship with somebody, you're going to accidentally sort of anticipate that same behavior. So you'll either swing like overly intense, trying to make sure it doesn't happen, or you'll accidentally sort of like fall into it and behave as if it is happening even when it's not. That's the hard part. These roles become normalized for us. I would love to hear what role you guys all had in your family. So here's some roles, and I'm sure I'm going to miss some roles. The common roles that happen in families are the golden child, which is the person that can kind of do no wrong, and they're always like perfect, and they're held up as the example for the family. Then there is the clown, and that's the one, usually that's the youngest. That's the one that sort of just keeps the family laughing and distracted and acts like comic relief. My late husband played the clown in his family. There's the lost child. The lost child, that was my sister, and it's often the middle child. The lost child's the child that's sort of invisible, sort of disappears. They're the one that's always sinks themselves into TV or a video game, or back in the day when I was growing up, it was a book. My sister was always in her room reading a book. Then you often have the caretaker, the parentified adult, and that was me. I played that role to some level where they lean on you like you're a surrogate parent, put you in charge of your siblings, and then kind of expect you to do a lot more than you should. And then there's the scapegoat, which is also in clinical terms referred to as the identified patient. That's usually the person who's seen as the problem. Or black sheep. That's also the scapegoat, as a black sheep. So they're the rebel, or maybe they're the one with the problems, or they're the one that just is sort of the dorky, clumsy, nerdy, always in trouble or always weird or on the outside of something. Now, interestingly enough about the scapegoat, and I was the scapegoat a lot in my family, scapegoats often are truth tellers. I don't know if you knew that. They often are the ones who sort of see things as they are. And because of that, one way to sort of shut that down and to disqualify that information is to make them the odd man out. It's a great way to hush it up. And the other thing about scapegoats is they act as a pressure valve for the family. Usually there's a lot of toxicity or unhealthiness happening, dysfunction happening in the family. So they focus on the scapegoat as a way to offset the pressure they're feeling in the family. So you don't need to talk about the fact that the parents aren't working well and that there's a lot of bubbling anger between them, and that maybe communication's really bad. They'll just focus on Junior or on Sissy, who's a problem or is not doing well at school, or came home late again today, or whatever the issue is. They end up being the one that's focused on instead of the ones that should be focused on. Exactly. It's interesting also that roles shift. Did you experience that in your family? Were you sometimes the lost child or the golden child and turn around and you ended up being the scapegoated, or maybe you ended up being the clown? Did you find that your sense that you sort of shifted roles? I did. I flipped between parentified child, the parent, the surrogate parent, and also the scapegoat. Interestingly, here's another thing that sort of worked against me. And by the way these roles get assigned is really mysterious. It's wild. It's usually for a combination of reasons, like it's how the parents sort of feel about you when you're born. It's sometimes the way you look, or maybe some of the mannerisms that you happen to have. It may be the way that you kind of emotionally impact the parent. It's really fascinating. It's not always for legitimate reasons. So let me give you an example how it happened in my family. I often was sort of the surrogate mother because I look like my mom's mom. So she's now deceased, but if you saw images of her and me side by side, and if I didn't have any makeup and my hair pulled back, I look eerily like my grandmother. And so for my mom, it was a very easy to assign me that role just because of the familiarity that I had, the fact that I triggered that for her. Why do parents do this? Why do they do this? Well, mom and dad get together, they have this relationship. They're not on the best footing. Maybe they're not doing really great with conflict resolution. Maybe there's financial pressures. Maybe they don't really know how to talk to each other. Maybe there's, maybe one of them's a narcissist and there's some narcissistic abuse going on, but things aren't healthy. That's the problem. Things aren't healthy. And then baby number one comes into the world. And suddenly they're now not just the two of them, they're the three of them. And that changes the dynamics. And by the way, threes are always a rough combination because that sets it perfectly up for triangulation. Have you guys heard of triangulation before? Think of a stool. A two-legged stool obviously doesn't work. You can't sit on a two-legged stool. Obviously, a four-legged stool would even be more stable. But three legs starts to stabilize an unstable situation. So if you got two people who are together and they're not stable and suddenly a third person comes into the mix, it stabilizes things, but in a bad way. So say that first they can't talk to each other. What they'll do, they'll talk to the third person instead of talking to each other. They'll run to that third person. That so-and-so is really upsetting me. I don't know why they're doing what they're doing. Can you believe that? Would that upset you too? Now, granted, with a baby, you can't do that. But what you can do is you can emotionally latch on to the child and start to use the child to meet your needs that you don't feel you're getting your needs met through the relationship. You're not dealing with each other directly. You're communicating, using the third person to communicate through the difficulties, or going to the third person to get your needs that you should be getting met through the other person, for the primary person. I've put together an incredible team of panelists, and we're going to be discussing toxic families, best coping and management strategies for toxic or narcissistic families, surviving the chaos of a narcissistic family member. And that includes, we're going to be having Lee Hammock, Bree Peterson of Abusive Abuse. It will also include Nia, How to Love a Battered Woman, Lisa Sunny with Stronger Than Before, SJ of La Disco Mama, SJ Coaching, and Ro of Roller Coaster Love is going to be the panelists. We're going to be talking about, again, toxic and narcissistic families. As you notice, all of those either have a family, like I was thinking of Lee, coping with him, living with him and his relationship with his children, or they have partners that they're trying to co-parent with, or they've come up through an abused or neglected home situation like myself and Bree and Nia has, and maybe some of the other ones has as well. So I'm super excited. It's going to be February 9th. So that's on sale now. It's going to be an amazing it's a lunchtime. It's going to be an amazing lunchtime. Well, thank you so much for hanging out with me. Now, I want to remind you of Thursday. Come in here at 1 o'clock. We're going to do breath recentering. So we'll cover 3 types of centering breaths in the guided mind-body reconnection experience. All right, you guys, thank you so much for today. I'm going to wrap it up. I'll be back here on Thursday for that. Make sure if you want to come to that webinar about family dynamics, if you like today, this is going to be even more, greater and better than what you had today. So, and if you want a replay of this, go over to YouTube. It's up now. You can watch it now and replay this. And you guys are amazing. You know how much I love you. You guys take care and have a good week. Bye-bye.